Structure comes first, decoration second, which brings us to a larger question of what are the priorities in design. Maybe there are lots of other things we should be thinking about when we are designing slides. And let me show you a few pictures from the world of industrial design, but I promise you it's more or less the same for slides. The considerations are more or less the same. Thing number one, what do you think is the key priority here? And many people say, well, it's a beautiful pen, but I think that this is not the most important thing here. The most important thing that this is a cheap pen. This is a very cost-effective design, and I think this was the single most important thing the designer was thinking about when he was trying to create this. And it is always important to remember there are always those time constraints or financial constraints. As a consultant, client pays for my time. You're probably employed, which means that your employer is paying for your time. Even if you're a student, there are alternative ways you can spend your time. So the design you are doing costs something, and you should be thinking about cost. It mostly has to do with time. We do not use any costly materials. The second consideration would be, are we trying to communicate status? And sometimes we do, but in slides, very rarely so. If you're working for some, investment bank working with VIP clients, then your slides will probably have black background and, golden text. But oftentimes it's just white background. We're not trying to design exclusive art here. For one thing, we do not access to any materials. We don't have access to gold or this wood. All we have is just screen and paper. But secondly, we're not artists. We are designers. We try to design practical things. We do not try to design art. If you are trying to design art, maybe you've chosen the wrong profession. Not a consideration as far as slides are concerned. And many mistakes stem from people trying to create something which looks too good for the task. Next thing is fun. This is a fun pen. Banana pen. Banana pen. This is a definition of creativity, right? Creativity is when you combine things from different domains and get unexpected and cool results. And this is a consideration in our design. Decoration is about fun. We're trying to make things prettier, livelier, more sort of interesting to look at. This is about creating eye candy, visually interesting slides, which is always a consideration. And thing number 4 is functionality, practicality. This is not a very cheap pen. This is not a very expensive pen either. This isn't a beautiful pen. It's just a functional pen. It's a pen which is very convenient for writing. It is optimized for writing. And I think this is the key thing. This is what we should be trying to accomplish. We should solve problems with slides. We should, reach goals. This is our main consideration. Try to make functional things, try to make functional slides. As far as I'm concerned, structure is about form follows function, right? Structure is about supporting functionality. So begin with that. And as always, if you try to create things which are both cheap but look expensive, that are fun and functional, well, sometimes you get stuff like this. So I think you have to have your priorities straight. What is the most important thing for you now? And sometimes it is cost effectiveness, sometimes it is price, but sometimes it is fun, and sometimes it is functionality. Personally, I often default to functionality. I try to reach goals with my slides. A couple more examples from the world of architecture. This is cheap, and cheap could be ugly. And this is fine, by the way, because it's just, this is not a consideration. This is, of course, very beautiful, and it takes an artist to do that. So, always a question, are you an artist? Why should we be thinking about, beauty as slide designers? This is fun. This is actually a fun building, even though it's a grey box. And this is a practical building, and its purpose is to make things easier if you are defending yourself in, 15th century, probably. It doesn't work in the 21st century. It's beautiful in the 21st century rather than practical, but it used to be a practical building. So, there seems to be a conflict between practicality and beauty. Many people seem to believe that practical thing could not be beautiful and beautiful thing could not be practical. And it is often true, but sometimes it is not. There are quite a few very notable exceptions, and of course this is not a product of design, this is a product of evolution. But it's just so very hard to find things which were not designed in our everyday lives. And this is a beautiful and a very practical thing. It reaches its goals, it solves its problems, and at the same time it is very beautiful. And I think what we should be trying to create things like this. Another example is a warplane. I'm sorry for those military things, but once again it's very hard to find things which were not designed to be beautiful. And beauty is obviously not a consideration here. It just is beautiful because it's just so optimal, because it's just so functional. So here's a quote from Bucky Fuller, an American architect and designer. "When I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty. But when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it is wrong." So we should be using beauty as a criterion, but we should not strive to create beautiful things because, we tend to get off course if we look for beauty rather than for functionality. We are designing practical things. So, as far as I'm concerned, my priorities are frequently like this. I try to create practical, functional designs. I try to create designs that are readable, that facilitates information transfer. Secondly, fun. Fun is important. We have to be alive, and often this is my mistake. I underappreciate fun because of the pressure of being cost-effective, and cost-effective is always a consideration. If you move cost-effectiveness just one step up, your design will become boring. And finally, I don't try to create beautiful things, but rather I try to create things that look professionally, which is important for both me and my clients. And sometimes those priorities move, but often this is how they are. And I think you have to think for yourselves. And of course, I will be very glad if you move functionality to the first position. I think this is the single most important thing if you are creating design as opposed to art.